Emma Martinez stared at the letter in her shaking hands, reading it for the third time because it couldn't possibly say what she thought it said. Dear Ms. Martinez, I am writing to inform you that you are the primary beneficiary of the estate of Margaret Elizabeth Rhodes, who passed away on September 3rd. The estate, valued at approximately $750,000, will be transferred to you upon fulfillment of one condition. You must provide care for Mrs. Rhodes's golden retriever, Buddy, age 12, for the remainder of his natural life. Failure to maintain custody and appropriate care of the dog will result in the estate transferring to the secondary beneficiary. Please contact our office to arrange the details. Emma had never heard of Margaret Rhodes. She'd certainly never done anything to deserve $750,000, and she definitely, absolutely did not want a dog. But $750,000 could change everything. It could pay off her student loans, get her out of her rat-infested studio apartment, maybe, finally, let her focus on her art instead of working 3 jobs just to survive. All she had to do was take care of some old lady's dog for however long old dogs lived. A year? 2? How hard could it be? Emma had no idea that accepting this inheritance would lead her on a mystery spanning 3 decades through the hidden corners of Seattle into the life of a woman she never knew, but who somehow knew everything about her. She had no idea that Buddy wasn't just a pet. He was a messenger, carrying secrets that would explain why a stranger left her a fortune, and why someone was now willing to do anything to make sure those secrets stayed buried. If this story of unexpected inheritance, hidden connections, and one extraordinary dog moves you, please subscribe to Second Chance Stories and hit that notification bell. What unfolds will challenge everything Emma believes about coincidence, family, and the legacies we leave behind. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Emma Martinez was 29 years old and approximately $47,000 in debt. She had a BFA in fine arts from a school whose name impressed exactly nobody, a portfolio of paintings that gallery owners called interesting but not commercial enough, and a life held together by duct tape, optimism, and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. By day, she worked as a barista at a corporate coffee chain in downtown Seattle. 3 evenings a week, she waited tables at a Thai restaurant in Capitol Hill. Weekends, she drove for a rideshare company. The rest of her time, maybe 10 hours a week if she was lucky, she painted in her 300-square-foot studio apartment in a building that should have been condemned but instead charged $1,400 a month because it was Seattle, and that's just how things were. Her parents, who'd immigrated from Mexico in the 90s and built a successful landscaping business, didn't understand why Emma was wasting her education on art when she could have been a teacher or accountant. Something stable. Her younger sister, Sophia, who'd done exactly that and was now a CPA with a house in Tacoma, liked to send Emma job listings with subject lines like, "Still not too late." Emma's last relationship had ended 8 months ago, when her girlfriend Maya had finally admitted she couldn't date someone who was always broke and stressed and unavailable, which was fair. Emma was always broke and stressed and unavailable. Sometimes, late at night, after working a double shift, Emma would sit in her apartment and wonder if her parents and Maya were right, if she should give up on the art thing and accept that dreams were for people with trust funds and safety nets, people who didn't have to choose between fixing their car and buying new paintbrushes, people who weren't 29 and still felt like they were treading water while everyone else had figured out how to swim. The letter from the law firm of Patterson and Associates had arrived on a Thursday. Emma almost threw it away, assuming it was a scam or debt collection. But the letterhead looked legitimate, and when she Googled the firm, they were real, a small estate law practice in Ballard. She called the number. A receptionist put her through to James Patterson, who confirmed that yes, this was real, and yes, Emma was actually the beneficiary of a significant estate. "But I don't know anyone named Margaret Rhodes," Emma said. "Are you sure you have the right person?" "Quite sure. You are Emma Sophia Martinez, born March 15th, 1995, graduated from Pacific Northwest College of Art in 2017, currently residing at 1847 Boylston Avenue East, Unit 304. "Yes, but—" "Then you're the right person." Mrs. Rhodes was very specific. She had your information in her files for the past 7 years. Emma felt a chill. "She's been tracking me for 7 years?" "I wouldn't say tracking, more like monitoring. She never contacted you?" "Never." Patterson paused. "Well, that makes this more mysterious. Mrs. Rhodes left very clear instructions. The estate goes to you, provided you care for her dog. If you're not willing or able, the estate goes to her daughter, Rachel Rhodes, who has already contacted us multiple times demanding we invalidate the will." "Why would someone leave me their money instead of their own daughter?" "I'm afraid I don't know. Mrs. Rhodes and her daughter were estranged for many years. But I should warn you, Rachel is contesting the will. She's claiming you must have manipulated her mother somehow, even though you claim you've never met. The court date is in 6 weeks. If you want to fight for this inheritance, you'll need to prove you're providing adequate care for Buddy and that your claim is legitimate." Emma's mind was racing. $750,000, enough to change her entire life. But a dying woman's dog, a hostile daughter, and a mystery she didn't understand. "Can I meet the dog first, before I decide?" "Of course. Mrs. Rhodes' house hasn't been cleared yet. The dog is currently there, being cared for by a pet sitter. I can give you the address." Emma drove to Magnolia the next morning, a neighborhood she'd only ever passed through, where houses cost millions and had water views and actual yards. Margaret Rhodes's house was a charming craftsman on a quiet street lined with cherry trees. Nothing ostentatious, but solid, well-maintained, the kind of house that represented a life well lived. A woman in her 50s answered the door. "You must be Emma. I'm Susan, the pet sitter. Come in." The inside of the house was like stepping into another era. Hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, furniture that was old but cared for, photos on every surface. Margaret as a young woman, Margaret with a man who must have been her husband, Margaret with a little girl who became a teenager, who became an angry-looking adult woman in the later photos before disappearing from the frames entirely. And dogs. Photos of dogs everywhere. Different dogs throughout the years, but always golden retrievers. The most recent photos showed Margaret, elderly and silver-haired, with a golden dog by her side. "That's Buddy," Susan said, following Emma's gaze. "He's in the backyard. Fair warning, he's not doing well. Margaret died 3 weeks ago, and he's been grieving." They walked through the kitchen to the back door, and Emma saw him. An old golden retriever lying in a patch of sunlight, his coat faded to white around his muzzle, his body thin. When Susan opened the door, the dog lifted his head, but didn't get up. "Hey, Buddy," Susan said softly. "There's someone here to meet you." Emma stepped outside, and Buddy's eyes tracked her movement. They were brown and impossibly sad, the eyes of a creature who'd lost everything that mattered. "How old is he?" Emma asked. 12. That's old for a golden. The vet says he's healthy considering his age, but he's got arthritis in his hips. He needs medication, twice a day, a special diet, and he can't do long walks anymore. Emma knelt down a few feet from Buddy. Hey there, I'm Emma. Buddy looked at her for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, he stood up and walked over to her. He sniffed her hand, then pressed his head against her palm in a gesture so trusting, so desperate for connection, that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. He likes you, Susan said. He hasn't really responded to anyone since Margaret died. I was worried he was just giving up. Emma ran her hand over Buddy's soft fur. He was warm and solid, and when she looked into his eyes, she felt something shift in her chest. This dog was mourning. He'd lost his person, his home, his entire world. And now his fate depended on whether Emma, a stranger, was willing to upend her life for an inheritance she didn't understand. What happens to him if I say no? Emma asked. Susan's face darkened. Rachel wants to euthanize him. She says he's too old, that it's cruel to keep him alive, that her mother was being irrational at the end. But Emma, Margaret was sharp as a tack until the day she died. She knew exactly what she was doing. Emma stayed for an hour, sitting in the backyard with Buddy. The dog stayed close to her, occasionally looking toward the house as if expecting Margaret to come out. It broke Emma's heart. Before she left, she walked through the house with Susan. Margaret's bedroom was simple. A bed, a dresser, more photos. On the nightstand was a leather-bound journal. Emma picked it up. Can I take this? Susan hesitated. I'm not sure what the legal... Please, if this woman left me everything she had, maybe there's something in here that explains why. Susan nodded. Take it. If Rachel asks, I'll say I didn't see you. Emma drove back to her apartment with the journal on her passenger seat and the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on her. That night, she opened the journal. The first entry was dated 7 years ago. Today, I saw her, Emma Martinez, working at the coffee shop on Pike Street. She looked so much like Sophia at that age, the same determined chin, the same careful movements. She has no idea who I am, of course. How could she? I gave up the right to be known when I made my choice 30 years ago, but I need to know she's okay. I need to know she's surviving. And if I'm honest with myself, I need to know if she has any of Sophia's gifts. If the art skipped a generation, or if it's alive in her too. Emma's hands were shaking. Sophia was her middle name, but it was also her mother's name. What did Margaret mean she looked like Sophia at that age? She flipped forward, reading entries spanning years. Emma's paintings are extraordinary. I went to her senior show, stood in the back, where she wouldn't notice me. She has Sophia's eye for color, her ability to capture light. But she also has something Sophia never had: courage. Sophia was too afraid to fail, so she never tried. Emma tries, she fails, she tries again. That's the difference. She's struggling financially. I want to help, but how can I without revealing myself? If she knew the truth, she'd hate me. She has every right to hate me. Her girlfriend left her. Emma looks so lost lately. I watch her sometimes through the coffee shop window. She still smiles for customers, but the smile doesn't reach her eyes. I know that smile. I wore it for years. Emma felt violated and confused in equal measure. Who was Sophia that Margaret kept mentioning? It couldn't be her mother. Her mother's maiden name was Flores, and she'd lived in Mexico until she was 22. This made no sense. She kept reading. The most recent entry was dated 2 days before Margaret died. I don't have much time left. The doctor says weeks at most. I've made my decision. The money goes to Emma, but only if she takes Buddy. I need to know she'll stay long enough to understand. Buddy knows what to do. He's been trained for this his entire life. He'll take her to all the places, show her all the pieces. And maybe, when she understands everything, she'll forgive me for the choice I made. The choice that meant she could exist at all. Emma closed the journal, her mind reeling. The choice that meant she could exist. What did that mean? The next day, Emma called James Patterson. I'll do it. I'll take Buddy. You're sure? It's a significant commitment, and Rachel will fight you. I'm sure. When can I pick him up? 2 days later, Emma brought Buddy home to her tiny apartment. It was immediately clear this was a terrible idea. Buddy couldn't manage the stairs to her third-floor walk-up, so Emma had to carry him, all 70 pounds of him. Her apartment was too small, had no yard, and her lease specifically said no pets over 20 pounds. But when Buddy settled onto the blankets she'd laid out and looked at her with those grateful brown eyes, Emma thought maybe she could make it work for however long he had left. The first week was chaos. Emma's work schedule was incompatible with a dog who needed to go out every few hours. She couldn't afford doggy daycare. Her apartment began to smell like dog, despite her best efforts. Her landlord left a warning notice on her door. But Buddy was healing. Slowly, incrementally, he was coming back to life. He ate more enthusiastically. He wagged his tail when Emma came home. He slept through the night, pressed against her bed, and Emma found the weight of his presence comforting in a way she hadn't expected. On day 8, something strange happened. Emma was walking Buddy through her neighborhood when he suddenly pulled hard on the leash, harder than she'd seen him move since she got him. He was trying to go in a specific direction, toward Pike Street. Buddy, we need to go back. I have to work in an hour. But Buddy was insistent. He pulled with surprising strength, and Emma, curious now, let him lead. He took her directly to the coffee shop where she worked. Not the entrance, the alley behind it, where employees took their breaks. Buddy walked to a specific spot near the back door and sat down, looking up at Emma expectantly. What? What's here, Buddy? Emma looked around. Just a normal alley. Dumpsters, employee parking, the back door to the coffee shop. Then she noticed something on the wall. A piece of paper in a waterproof sleeve, taped at dog-eye level. Emma crouched down and pulled it off. Inside was a note in Margaret's handwriting. Emma, if Buddy brought you here, it means you're starting to understand. This is where I first saw you 7 years ago. I was sitting at a table by the window, drinking terrible coffee and reading the newspaper. You were working the morning shift. A man came in, angry, aggressive, yelling at you about his order being wrong. You stayed calm. You apologized, even though it wasn't your fault. You remade his drink. And after he left, I saw you take a shaky breath, saw your hands trembling, but you put your smile back on and helped the next customer. That's when I knew. You had Sophia's strength, the strength I never had. I started coming every day after that, just to watch you work. I know that sounds creepy. Maybe it was, but I needed to know you were okay. I needed to know you were going to make it. Turn this paper over. Emma flipped it. On the back was an address in Capitol Hill and a single word: next. Emma's shift was starting in 30 minutes, but she called in sick. This was more important. The address was an art supply store. Emma had been to 100 times. The only place in Seattle that sold the specific brand of oil paints she preferred. Buddy led her directly to the paint aisle and sat in front of a specific section. Taped behind a row of titanium white tubes was another note. You came here at least once a month, usually on payday, and you'd spend exactly $43 on supplies. I calculated it once. That's what you had left after rent, loans, and food. $43 for your art. Most people would have given up. Most people would have said they couldn't afford to paint anymore. But not you. You protected those $43 like they were life itself. Because to you, they were. The art wasn't optional. It was survival. That's what made me certain. You were the right person. Next location, the park bench where Sophia and I used to sit before everything fell apart. Buddy knows where. Emma felt like she was in a fever dream. Buddy was leading her through Seattle on some kind of scavenger hunt designed by a dead woman she'd never met, revealing that she'd been watched for years. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Emma felt compelled to keep going, to understand. Buddy took her to Volunteer Park, straight to a specific bench overlooking the water tower. Another note, this one longer. I need to tell you about Sophia, your grandmother, my daughter. I gave her up for adoption when she was 3 days old. I was 16, unmarried, terrified. It was 1963, and there were no good options for girls like me. My parents sent me away, I had the baby, and they took her before I could even hold her properly. They told me it was for the best, that she'd have a better life, that I'd forget and move on. I didn't forget. I never moved on. But I did try to build a new life. I got my GED, went to college, became a teacher, married a good man named Robert. We had a daughter, Rachel. I should have been grateful for what I had, but there was always a hole, always a missing piece. When Rachel was 15, I started searching for Sophia. It took 2 years, but I found her. She'd been adopted by a family in California, Maria and Carlos Flores. They'd emigrated to the US from Mexico, built a good life, raised Sophia with love. She became a teacher like me, married young, had 2 daughters. She was happy, and I realized that contacting her would only hurt her. What could I offer except disruption, guilt, questions with no good answers? So I stayed away. I watched from a distance. I saw photos on Facebook. Sophia was beautiful, successful, had a full life. And then I saw photos of her daughters, you and your sister. And Emma, when I saw your paintings that you posted online, I wept. Because I paint too. I always have. It's the only thing that ever made sense to me. And there you were, my granddaughter, who didn't know I existed, painting with the same desperate hunger I'd always felt. I'd given up one daughter and watched from a distance. I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. I couldn't be your grandmother openly. That truth would destroy your mother's sense of who she was. But I could watch over you. I could make sure that when I was gone, you'd have what I never did, the financial freedom to choose art without starving for it. Next, the gallery where you almost gave up. Emma sat on the bench for 20 minutes, crying into Buddy's fur, while joggers and tourists passed by. Her grandmother. Margaret was her grandmother, her mother's biological mother, which meant her mother had no idea, had grown up not knowing, had built her entire identity on being Maria and Carlos's daughter. This inheritance wasn't random. It was legacy. It was guilt. It was love from a woman who'd given up her child and spent 60 years trying to make peace with that choice. Emma pulled out her phone. She needed to call her mom, tell her everything. But then she hesitated. What would this do to her mother? Sophia Martinez was 61 years old. She'd just retired after 30 years teaching middle school. She was finally traveling with Emma's father, finally enjoying life. Did Emma have the right to blow up her mother's understanding of her own origin story? And what about Rachel, Margaret's other daughter, the one who'd been raised knowing exactly who her mother was? Rachel was the legitimate child, the one Margaret had kept, and now Margaret had left most of her estate to a granddaughter Rachel didn't know existed. No wonder she was contesting the will. Buddy nudged Emma's hand with his nose. Right. The gallery, where she almost gave up. It was a small gallery in Pioneer Square. Emma had shown there once 2 years ago in a group exhibit for emerging artists. She'd sold exactly one painting, a small landscape that had gone for $200. The gallery owner had been kind but honest. Your work is good, Emma, but good isn't enough in this market. Unless you're willing to do more commercial work, or get an MFA from a prestigious program, or have connections, it's going to be really hard to make it. Emma had walked out of that gallery and seriously considered giving up, getting a real job, accepting that art would only ever be a hobby. Buddy led her to the alley behind the gallery. Another note. I was there that night. I saw you leave, saw your face. You looked like I'd felt 1,000 times, like someone who'd just realized the dream might not happen. I followed you to that bar on 2nd Avenue. You ordered one drink and sat alone for 2 hours staring at your phone. I wanted to buy you another drink, wanted to tell you that it gets better, that success isn't the only measure of an artist's worth. But I couldn't, so I went back to the gallery and bought the painting you'd sold. It's hanging in my bedroom. It's a sunrise over the Sound, all golds and pinks, and that impossible blue. Every morning I looked at it, I remembered that you'd kept going. You didn't give up after that night. You got up the next day and painted again. That's why the money goes to you, Emma. Not because you're the best artist, not because you're going to be famous, but because you're someone who keeps painting even when no one's buying. That's what makes you my granddaughter in the ways that matter. Final location, my house. Buddy will show you where. They drove to Magnolia. Susan wasn't there. Emma used the key James Patterson had given her. Buddy walked through the house like he owned it, straight to Margaret's bedroom. He sat in front of the closet door. Emma opened it. On the top shelf was a box. Inside was Margaret's life story in objects. Birth certificate, photos of her as a teenager, hospital records from 1963 showing the birth of baby girl Rhodes, given up for adoption. Letters from the adoption agency, and then years later, documents from the private investigator who'd found Sophia. Photos of Emma's mother, high school graduation, wedding day, pregnant with Emma and her sister. Margaret had watched her daughter's entire life unfold at a distance. At the bottom of the box was one more letter. Emma, if you've made it this far, you know everything. You know who I was, what I did, and why I left you my estate. Now you have to decide what to do with this information. You can tell your mother, that's your right. But please think carefully about whether that knowledge will help her or hurt her. Sophia had good parents who loved her. I gave her that by giving her up. Taking that away from her now seems cruel. But that's your choice to make, not mine. I've already made my choice. The money is yours regardless. Buddy is yours too, if you want him. He's a good boy. He's kept me company through a lot of lonely years. And he's trained to do one more thing for you. If you need to find me or find yourself, just tell him, show me. He'll take you to the places that mattered. The places where I painted, where I felt most alive, where I was most myself. Maybe those places will help you too. I'm sorry I couldn't know you while I was alive, but I'm grateful that in death I can give you something I never had. Freedom to be an artist without fear. Don't waste it. Paint bravely. Live fully. Forgive me if you can. Margaret. Emma sat on Margaret's bed, surrounded by evidence of a life lived in the shadows of an impossible choice. She looked at Buddy, who was watching her with those steady brown eyes. "Show me," Emma said. Buddy stood and walked out of the bedroom. Emma followed. He led her out of the house, down the driveway, and through the neighborhood. They walked for 15 minutes until they reached a small park overlooking Puget Sound. Buddy took her to a bench tucked away from the main path, hidden by trees but with a perfect view of the water. On the back of the bench, carved into the wood, were initials: MR 1963 to 2023. I was here. Emma sat on the bench, and Buddy settled at her feet. She looked out at the water, at the mountains in the distance, at the light catching on the waves. This is where Margaret had come to paint, where she'd sit for hours, capturing the water in all its moods, where she'd thought about the daughter she'd given up and the granddaughter she'd watched from afar. Emma pulled out her phone and took a photo of the view. Then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She opened her art Instagram account and posted the photo with a caption. "Sometimes inheritance isn't just money. Sometimes it's permission. Permission to keep going. Permission to believe that what you make matters, even if nobody's buying it. I just found out my biological grandmother left me everything, including the knowledge that she was an artist too. I never met her, but she saw me in ways I didn't see myself." This is dedicated to Margaret Rhodes, who painted bravely and loved from a distance. I'll try to do the same. The post got 47 likes in the first hour, more engagement than Emma usually got. But more importantly, it felt like closing one chapter and opening another. Over the next 3 weeks, Emma let Buddy lead her to more of Margaret's places, the art studio where she'd taken classes in her 40s, the small cafe where she'd sketched portraits of customers for tips during a hard financial year, the community center where she'd taught free art classes to teenagers. Each place had a small marker, initials carved in a tree, a stone painted with a date. Margaret's way of saying, "I was here, I made this, I mattered." And Emma documented all of it. She posted photos, wrote about Margaret's life, shared the strange story of inheriting a grandmother she'd never known. People responded. Other artists shared their own stories of almost giving up, of financial struggle, of inherited dreams. Emma's follower count grew. A local blogger wrote about the story. Then a Seattle news station picked it up. Local artist inherits fortune and grandmother's legacy from woman she never met. The attention led to unexpected opportunities. A gallery owner reached out, wanting to show Emma's work, alongside some of Margaret's paintings. Emma had found dozens in the house. A writer from an arts magazine wanted to do a feature, and most surprisingly, a non-profit that funded emerging artists offered Emma a grant to continue her work. But Rachel Rhodes was not happy. 4 weeks before the court date, Emma received a cease and desist letter from Rachel's lawyer. She was being accused of exploiting Margaret's story for personal gain, of manipulating a dying woman, and of unfairly benefiting from an inheritance that should have gone to the legitimate child. Emma met with James Patterson, who looked tired. "Rachel's being aggressive. She's painting you as an opportunist who somehow convinced her mother to change the will. The fact that you never met Margaret actually works against you. It looks suspicious. But the journal, the letters, the DNA test I took, the DNA test proves you're related, but it doesn't prove Margaret was of sound mind when she made these decisions." Rachel is arguing her mother was mentally ill, that this obsession with a granddaughter she'd never met was evidence of instability. "What do I do?" "You need to prove that Margaret's intentions were clear, rational, and long-standing. And you need to show that you're fulfilling the terms of the will, that you're actually caring for Buddy, and that you deserve this inheritance. The court date fell on a grey November morning. Emma walked into the courthouse with Buddy at her side. She'd gotten him certified as an emotional support animal so he could be with her. Rachel was there with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in an expensive suit. Rachel herself was in her late 50s, with Margaret's eyes and an expression of barely controlled fury. When Emma walked in, Rachel stood up. "You have some nerve bringing that dog here. That's my mother's dog." "Actually," Emma said quietly, "he's my dog now. Your mother left him to me. My mother was mentally ill. She became obsessed with a stranger because she couldn't deal with the guilt of abandoning her first child. You took advantage of a sick woman. I never met your mother. I didn't even know she existed until she died." "Exactly. What kind of person leaves their fortune to a complete stranger instead of their own daughter? My mother wasn't in her right mind." The judge entered, and everyone sat. Judge Patricia Morrison was in her 60s, with grey hair and a no-nonsense expression. "This is a will contest regarding the estate of Margaret Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes, you're arguing that your mother lacked testamentary capacity when she executed this will." Rachel's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor, will show that Mrs. Rhodes had a history of depression, that she became fixated on Ms. Martinez in an unhealthy way, and that the will is a product of that mental illness rather than rational decision-making." "Ms. Martinez, you're defending the will?" James Patterson stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We'll demonstrate that Mrs. Rhodes was of sound mind, that her wishes were clear and consistent over many years, and that Ms. Martinez has fulfilled the terms of the will by providing excellent care for the dog in question." The hearing took 3 hours. Rachel's lawyer presented medical records showing Margaret had been treated for depression after Rachel's father died. She called a psychiatrist who testified that obsessively tracking a stranger could indicate delusional thinking. She presented testimony from neighbors who said Margaret had become increasingly withdrawn and eccentric in her final years. Then it was Patterson's turn. He called Emma to the stand. "Ms. Martinez, when did you first learn about Margaret Rhodes?" 3 weeks after she died. I got a letter about the inheritance." "Had you ever had any contact with her before that?" "No, not that I knew of. But you've since learned that she'd been aware of you for 7 years." "Yes, she left notes, a journal. She'd been watching me, not in a creepy way, but just making sure I was okay." "Why would she do that?" Emma took a breath. "Because she was my biological grandmother. She gave up my mother for adoption in 1963 and spent 60 years regretting it. When she found out about me, about my art, she saw a chance to support the family she'd given up. She couldn't be my grandmother openly. That would have hurt my mother, who didn't know she was adopted. So she did it this way, by leaving me resources to pursue art, the way she'd wished she could when she was young." "And the dog? Why make Buddy part of the inheritance?" "Because he was her companion, and because taking care of him forced me to stay engaged long enough to find all the letters, to understand her story. If she'd just left me money, I might have taken it and never known who she was. Buddy made me slow down, made me search, made me understand." Rachel's lawyer cross-examined. "Isn't it convenient that your biological grandmother left you $750,000, that you just happened to be a struggling artist who needed money?" "It wasn't convenient. It was intentional. She wanted to help me." "Or maybe you convinced her to help you. Maybe you found out about her somehow and manipulated her into changing her will." "I never met her. How could I manipulate someone I never met? That's what we're trying to understand, Ms. Martinez. The turning point came when Patterson called Susan, the pet sitter, to the stand. How long did you know Mrs. Rhodes? About 15 years. I walked her dogs, took care of them when she traveled. What was her mental state in the final months of her life? Sharp, completely lucid. She knew exactly what she was doing with the will. She talked about it several times. What did she say? She said Rachel would be angry, but that it was the right thing to do. She said Emma deserved a chance that she and Sophia never had. She said money could do more good for someone at the beginning of their life than someone at the end. Rachel was already financially secure. She's a successful real estate agent. But Emma was struggling. Margaret wanted to change that. Did Mrs. Rhodes seem delusional to you? Obsessive? No. She seemed like someone trying to make amends for a choice that had haunted her for 60 years. That's not mental illness. That's guilt and love, and trying to do something meaningful with what time she had left. Rachel's lawyer tried to discredit Susan, but the damage was done. Then Patterson played his final card. He presented Margaret's journal. 7 years of entries documenting her observations of Emma, her reasoning, her intentions. Your Honor, this isn't the journal of a mentally ill woman. This is the journal of someone who made a hard choice at 16 and spent her life trying to make peace with it. Ms. Rhodes couldn't be Emma's grandmother openly without causing pain to her daughter Sophia. But she could ensure Emma had opportunities she'd never had. That's not insanity. That's sacrifice. Judge Morrison took a recess to review the evidence. When she returned, her expression was thoughtful. I've reviewed the medical records, the journal entries, the testimony. What we have here is a woman who made a deeply personal choice about how to distribute her assets. Was that choice unusual? Yes. Was it motivated by guilt? Probably. But being unusual or guilt-motivated doesn't make someone mentally incompetent. She looked at Rachel. Ms. Rhodes, I understand you feel hurt by your mother's decision, but the evidence shows your mother was of sound mind when she made this will. She had the right to leave her assets to whomever she chose, for whatever reasons made sense to her. She turned to Emma. Ms. Martinez, you fulfilled the terms of the will by caring for Buddy. The inheritance is yours, but I'd encourage you to think carefully about what your grandmother was trying to give you. It wasn't just money, it was permission to live differently than she did, to choose art over security, to take risks she never could. Don't waste it. I won't, Your Honor. This court finds in favor of Ms. Martinez. The will stands. Outside the courthouse, Rachel confronted Emma. You know what the worst part is? My mother never loved me the way she loved Sophia. Sophia was the one she gave up, so Sophia was the one who stayed perfect in her mind. I was the one she kept, so I was the one who disappointed her. And now you get the money, you get the house, you get to be the artist she always wanted to be. What do I get? Emma wanted to be angry, but instead she just felt sad for this woman who'd grown up in the shadow of a ghost. You got to know her. You had her for 58 years. I never got that. Lucky you, she was exhausting to love. Rachel walked away, and Emma stood on the courthouse steps with Buddy and James Patterson and the weight of $750,000 she hadn't earned but had somehow inherited anyway. What now? Patterson asked. Now I paint, Emma said. 3 months later, Emma had a show at the gallery where she'd almost given up 2 years earlier. It was a joint exhibition. 2 generations, Margaret Rhodes and Emma Martinez. Margaret's paintings hung alongside Emma's new work. They shared the same obsession with light, the same love of the Pacific Northwest's moody beauty, the same sense of capturing moments before they disappeared. Emma had used some of the inheritance money to rent a studio, quit her side jobs, and paint full-time. She'd also set up a scholarship fund in Margaret's name for young artists from low-income backgrounds. $25,000 per year for 5 years, enough to make a real difference. The show opened on a rainy February evening. Emma stood in the gallery, watching people move between the paintings, and felt Margaret's presence in the room. Her mother was there. Emma had told her everything. About Margaret, about the adoption, about the inheritance. Sophia had cried for 3 days. Then she'd gotten angry. At Margaret for not reaching out, at Emma for not telling her sooner, at the universe for keeping secrets. But eventually, she'd come around to a kind of acceptance. "I had good parents," Sophia said, standing in front of one of Margaret's paintings. "Maria and Carlos loved me completely. I wouldn't trade that for anything. But I wish I could have known her. I wish she'd trusted me enough to tell me the truth. She thought she was protecting you." "I know, and maybe she was right. Maybe I wouldn't have handled it well, but I'll never know now." Sophia put her arm around Emma. "I'm glad you got to finish her story, though. I'm glad she got to be part of your life, even if it was complicated." Emma's sister Sophia showed up with their father. Maya, Emma's ex-girlfriend, came too. They'd been texting, cautiously rebuilding a friendship. Even Susan the pet sitter came, bringing homemade cookies. And Buddy was there, of course, wearing a bow tie, lying on a cushion Emma had brought for him, greeting visitors with tail wags and the patient dignity of a very old dog who'd lived through remarkable things. Halfway through the opening, a woman Emma didn't recognize approached her. She was in her 30s, professional-looking, with a portfolio case. "Emma Martinez, I'm Jessica Torres. I'm a curator at the Fry Art Museum. I've been following your story, and I'd like to talk about doing a larger exhibition about intergenerational artistic legacy, your work, your grandmother's work, maybe other artists who come from lineages of creativity that were interrupted by circumstance. Would you be interested?" Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, absolutely yes." "Great. Here's my card. Call me next week." After Jessica left, Emma sat down next to Buddy. The dog rested his head on her knee, and Emma ran her hand over his graying muzzle. "We did it, Buddy. We finished Margaret's scavenger hunt. We figured out why she left us her legacy. What do you think? Did we do okay?" Buddy's tail thumped against the floor. "Yes." Emma sold 5 paintings that night, more than she'd sold in the previous 3 years combined. But more important than sales was the feeling that she was doing what she was meant to do, that she was honoring not just Margaret's memory, but also her own calling. Before the gallery closed, Emma stood in front of her favorite painting in the show, one she'd done of the bench in Volunteer Park where she'd read Margaret's letter. In the painting, the bench was empty, but there was a golden shape in the corner. Buddy, guardian and guide, messenger and witness. She'd titled it The Inheritance, because what Margaret had given her wasn't just money. It was permission to be an artist without apology. It was connection to a family history she hadn't known existed. It was proof that someone had believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. And it was Buddy, the dog she'd never wanted, but who'd become the key to everything. Buddy lived for another year after the court case, a year during which Emma painted more and better than she ever had before. He was there when she opened her solo show at the Fry Museum. He was there when she bought a small house with a yard in Ballard. Nothing fancy, but solid and hers. He was there when she and Maya decided to try again, and when her mother finally visited Margaret's grave and left flowers. When Buddy passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 13, Emma scattered his ashes at the bench overlooking Puget Sound, the place where Margaret used to paint and where Buddy had first shown Emma her grandmother's secret world. "Thank you," Emma whispered to the wind. "Thank you for being stubborn. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for showing me that inheritance is about more than money. It's about the stories we pass down and the courage we find to tell them." She painted one final portrait, Buddy at the beach, his fur glowing in the sunset, his expression one of pure contentment. She donated it to the Seattle Humane Society with a plaque, "In memory of Buddy, who taught me that the things we inherit aren't always what we expect, but they're always what we need." 5 years after inheriting $750,000 and a dog she'd never wanted, Emma Martinez was a working artist, not famous, not wealthy, but making a living doing what she loved. She'd paid off her debts, helped her parents retire comfortably, and established herself as a voice in the Pacific Northwest art scene. But when people asked about her success, Emma always told them the same thing: "I inherited permission to fail. That's what made everything possible." And she'd show them a photo of an old golden retriever, the dog who'd led her through a stranger's life story and into her own. If this story touched your heart, we have so many more waiting for you. Stories of unexpected legacies, of dogs who carry messages we don't know we need, of families that form in ways we never imagined. Subscribe to Second Chance Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful reminders that inheritance is about more than money, that family extends beyond blood, and that sometimes a dog you never wanted becomes the key to understanding who you're meant to be. Share this with someone who's struggling to pursue their dreams, who feels like they're running out of time, who needs to hear that support can come from the most unexpected places. Drop a comment telling us about an inheritance you received that changed your life, whether it was money, wisdom, connection, or just permission to be yourself. We love hearing your stories, because every dog deserves to be understood, every legacy deserves to be honored, and every story about choosing courage over certainty deserves to be told. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come from people we never meet, delivered by dogs who refuse to give up until we understand what we've been given. All it took was one old golden retriever and the courage to follow where he led. That journey changed everything.